Looky there. That was a kill switch. So it's been a few weeks since I've got a roof on this sawmill shed, and pretty much, I mean, I've got it where I can use it. You know what I'm saying? Not finished, still have a few things left to do. But I wanted to go over, if I can, and I think I can, a few things that I consider maybe important and something that you might find helpful. Sharing with you why I'm doing it, or part of the reason. When I started thinking about a shed for the sawmill, I went to a few other channels, and I commented on a few other channels and a few other shed builds, tried to get a little information about, you know, the size people were using. I wanted to know the width. That's one thing, you know, you can't tell on TV, on your phone, the width. I wanted to know the width. I wanted to know the height people were building their sheds. And all I got back was crickets. Occasionally I'd get a little taste of something, but really it's like people didn't really want to disclose what they did on their shed. So I got to thinking, you know, there's probably thousands of people thinking about building a sawmill shed and would like to know, what did you do on yours? Not that you're going to build one like this or exactly like it, but you might build something similar to it, and you might just want to know, okay, well, what did you do? You might like the looks of this. I don't know, doesn't matter. But I do want to give you what I think are the tips or important things in building a shed. Might find it helpful. Let me begin by saying the first thing that I don't want to use the word proud, but I'm glad that I did, and something that I would suggest for everybody is not get in no big hurry before you start. What I mean by that is, I spent a good deal of time analyzing my property, where I wanted to park this sawmill, thus where I wanted to park the shed. I didn't want to put it, you know, just anywhere. I didn't want to put it in the way. So I spent a great deal of time considering the orientation and the footprint. I tried to consider where this thing might morph to, how it might change down the road. Now, of course, you don't know that, or I don't know that, but I've used it enough to where I know that the system that I've got works pretty well for a manual sawmill. Now, if I were to go to a hydraulic mill, things might change. But I've certainly watched a lot of hydraulic mill videos, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think what I've done would accommodate a hydraulic mill should I ever go to something like that. Don't know that the resources would ever allow that, but someday it might, and if it does, and someday the old back may not hold out, and I may need to go to that. But right now I don't. But I am grateful. That was one thing that I would highly recommend to everybody is before you stick the first spade in the ground, give good serious consideration to where you're going to put your footprint, how you're going to orient it, how you're going to enter the logs, exit in the slabs, how you're going to exit your lumber that you take off of it, where you're going to stack and dry your lumber, the proximity to that. Trying, as Robert Milton says down at Hobby Hardwood, trying to minimize steps, or I think his phrase is, take steps to save steps. And obviously with a manual mill, we're going to have more steps than he's going to have on that beautiful LT70 he's got. But minimizing the steps as much as possible, I mean, that's just good common sense. So that's important. Now, I guess the second thing I ought to get into is the construction of this thing. How did we build it? If you go back and watch any of the videos of the construction of my shed, you know that I used batter boards and pulled strings off of those batter boards to get square. And you also know, if you'll go back and look at the building, the construction of this, you'll see that by the grace of God, I got the thing square. When you put the tin on, that's really going to tell you how square you are. And quite honestly, this thing is about as square as anything I've ever put tin on. So let me go over the size of what I did. My goal was from the outside of my post to the outside of this post. If you pull off the here to here, it is 12 feet. Same way on the other end. Outside of post to outside of post, it's 12 feet wide. Now the posts are approximately 6 inches, 6 by 6s. That one over there was a 6 by 5. I think that one's a 6 by 5. But the posts are, and I tried to use, I guess I need to go ahead and mention that. I used all cedar out here in the found, out here on the property, or my brother-in-law's property. And I tried to cut off all the, I guess you would call it the sapwood, and use as red a cedar as possible. If you've ever noticed a fence post that's been in the ground for 50 years or something, it may be a lot smaller than it was when it was put in the ground. Well, what's gone off of that post is that white wood. That red's still there. So I tried to, in my cedar, I tried to get all, didn't achieve that goal in all of them, but that's what I used for post. Milled them down to either 5 by 6s or 6 by 6s. And I knew before I stuck them in the ground, before I cut them out in the woods, before I cut them to length, I knew in my head on a drawing that I'd done how tall that the post needed to be. You're not going to be adding to the post after you get them in the ground. So actually, I guess I should back up and say one of the most important things that I did at the start is made me a little drawing. Now you don't have to do that. It's going to help you a whole lot if you'll sketch out. Don't have to be anything fancy, but if you'll know before you begin, before you start, the big things, you're going to pat yourself on the back. You'll be glad that you did. All right, so the width of it is 12 by 12. Now, so from the outside of this first post to the outside of this last post is 30 feet. Let's see, yeah, it's 30 feet, 30 feet. I got lost there for a second because the span from this post to this post, I'll tell you that in a minute. So my basic footprint, 12 foot wide, outside to outside, that leaves you 11 feet wide, obviously inside the inside of post. And I have found that that is a plenty wide. Could you go narrower? Yes, I think, well, you could probably even go 2 foot narrower. The reason being that I'm glad I was able to go this wide. Let me just show you over here. Of course, you can see there the walking room, but I have these bins here that I use to catch the sawdust with. And then when they get, a good helping of sawdust, I go and dump them off. Fortunately, I've got a place I can dump them off. I can mill a lot before I need to do anything. And that's another consideration. But they're in under the main part of the shed. They're actually, the edge is 2 feet back from the edge. So that's why I'm glad. But do you have to have this room? No, you could probably make it 2 feet narrower. And it would still suit you and still work pretty good. But for my purposes, and I wouldn't suggest going any narrower, but sometimes you're limited by the span of your rafters or whatever. But for me, this worked out good, and I have no complaints about the width. I have no complaints about the length. Now my back posts, they're just divided up equal distance. The front post over here is a little bit different. From the outside of that post to the center of this post is 20 feet 9 inches. The reason I remember that on the top of my head is because I built a truss system that spans this distance. So on this front wall, the first post to the second post is 20 foot 9 inches. That gives me, because this post is 6 inches, that post is 6 inches, that gives me a clear span from post to post of 20 feet. And then whatever was left, let me just check that. From the outside of that post to the middle of that post would be 9 foot 3 inches. So that gives me 30 feet. All right, so that covers length and width. And I did leave something out, and it's an important thing. For my purposes, your situation, everybody's situation is different. In my situation, I was fortunate that I could do the grade how I wanted to. And when I'm talking about the grade, I'm talking about the ground, the top of the ground. Mine slopes about probably 1.5 inches from back to front, maybe just a little, maybe 2 inches over 30. It's hardly detectable underfoot that it's not perfectly flat and level. But getting your grade before you ever start your building, that is just really an important step, okay? So my grade here is we'll just call it flat, okay? It's very close to flat. I was fortunate again, I don't have concrete, but what I do have is what's called screenings from the quarry, and they pack, honest to goodness, underfoot. They pack as hard as concrete when they're dry. When they get wet, they get a little soupy, but this doesn't get wet under here. And so this is just, it's actually better than working on concrete. It's better on your back because you do have some little light imperfections. The height of this thing. This is important, your clearance in loading logs, depending on what you're loading with, what kind of equipment you have or what kind of equipment you project to have. The thing that requires the most distance for me, height-wise, is the skid steer. I have found so far, this is at 9 feet 3 inches from the ground. Let me check it right here. This would be the lowest point. 9 foot 3 inches. At the highest point, 9 foot 5 inches. So there's 2 inches of fall there, a little bit more than I thought. That's 111 inches there and 113 inches there. That clearance works for me. Now with the skid steer, I still have to be careful. But I would not want, my personal opinion, I would not want my opening where I'm loading the logs any less than 9 feet. I just would not do that, okay? On the back wall here, which the height, I wanted it down lower. And here again, the orientation of your building matters because we all have predominant winds or rains that come in from a certain direction. My predominant wind direction is this way, from there to there. That's you know, they can come in from anywhere, but predominantly they come in this way. And so I wanted my low side, okay, where the predominant winds are coming in. And it's 84 inches. Let me check my memory. That is correct. Actually right here it's 84 3/4, 85 3/4. It's 84 inches right up there at that end from the grade up to the bottom of this beam. Let me talk a little bit about this beam. 10 foot centers. This beam is way over what it needed to be to carry this load. I built a header. You could use a 6x6. I've seen this span done in 4x4s here in the South, okay? I've seen greater spans than this. I don't recommend it, but I could have built this. I could have built it out of put a 2x6 plate. The reason I did this, and if you look at it, there's a 2x6 plate on here, and it runs over the top of the post, and then it's fastened with a timber frame, either a 4 or 6 inch bolt that goes down into the post, okay? And then I stood up a 2x8, 2x6. That's a 2x8. And the reason I used these is because I had them. They were about 6 years old, been laying on the yard, and so I just had them and I used them. I know they're too big, but you know, it ain't going nowhere, right? So put that 2x6 on there. I could have stood up 2 2x4s, put another plate on that, and that would have been plenty to carry this load. So if you don't have timbers that big, don't sweat it. And you know, a lot of you guys in snow territory with 2 2x4s and 2 2x6s, I don't know what your snow load is, but I would probably use 2x6s as a minimum for a 10-foot span. You know, if you're going to build a header like this, just my opinion. I never lived in where you guys are at, where you have the big snow loads. Again, for us guys in the South, if you look at that, is that overbuilt? Yes. The front, the truss, I could have gone 22 feet with the same truss system if they're built correctly using, you know, this is full nominal width material. This was not dimensioned down. So, you know, you're looking at full 2-inch wide, 4-inch thick, or really close to that timbers. So it's very strong. Well, instead of trusting my memory, wrote down my costs. Nail plates, $50, concrete, $66, tin, $600. These are just rounded off. Fasteners, $75, that's $791. Rounded off at $800. $100 for lights, we're now at $900. The winch, $170, we're at $1,100, we're at $1,070. And then for electrical components, another $100. So we're just south of $1,200 to build this building. I hope that gives you some idea. Let me just throw out there, if I didn't cover something, and I'm sure that I didn't, I got on some dirty glasses, that's why I don't have them on. If I left something out that you have a question about, if you'll write me there at the front porch, some people call it the comment section, if you'll write me my question, Lord willing, if I'm still alive and I'm in good enough health to respond to your question, I will respond, and I'll try to answer your question best I know how. As I look, what I used to fasten the knee braces on, I used, in most cases, 6-inch timber frame, I guess you call them bolts. They're perfectly legal as far as building code in our area, just as much as a lag bolt, screws, whatever you call them. The rafters are, some people call it tulip poplar. The purlins are 1x6 pine. They didn't have to be 1x6, but you know, you're longer in the tooth, you need a little more to stand on. The rafters are set on 2-foot centers. I could have gone more using those 1-inch purlins, those 1x6 purlins. I could have gone a little more than 2 foot on center. Where the winch is attached, those rafters are doubled for strength. There is one section though, somebody mentioned, I don't remember who it was, said, tell us what you regret or what you would do over. If you had it to do over, what you would do. And that is a great question, because it's sort of like building a house. Until you live in the house, you can try to think through everything in the world, but until you live in it, you know, there's probably some little things you would have changed. With this shed here, are there some things I would have changed? I can honestly say the only thing I would have changed is I would have moved the shed back that direction about 10 feet. I set it a little bit too far for my property, for my use. I set it about 10 feet too far this direction. It's no big deal. Thrilled to death. I feel very fortunate and blessed and thankful that it is where it is. If I did have anything, I could have set it back that direction 10 feet farther, and that would have been the only thing I would have changed. I wouldn't change. I'm just trying to look and think, is there anything I would do differently or would change? I can't think of it right now. I honestly can't. What am I going to do in the future? What am I thinking? I'm thinking I may not. I may enclose a little bit of the top on this end because that's where the weather comes in. The saw head sits approximately, 9 feet from the end. So far, and we've had some blowing rains, you have too, I'm sure. So far it's not got wet. I might do that, I might not, because summertime's coming, and having a little bit of breeze through here is going to be mighty wonderful. So I may leave it open, I really might. It's wired. If I want to put up a fan, we'll just have to see what the summertime holds. So that's sort of a synopsis, if you will, of my shed. And again, if you have any questions at all, if there's anything I can answer about what I did here that I did not answer, if you'll let me know, I'll try to respond just as soon as I can. Let me ask you, if you've not subscribed and you've watched some of the channel, it doesn't cost you a penny. It's free, and it really helps. Evidently, from what everybody tells me and everything I read, subscribing, commenting, liking, interacting with the video helps the channel, and I would appreciate it if you'd do that. Listen, Lord willing, I'll see you in the next one. I mean, I don't want to be messing up or doing something dangerous or whatever, but I think she'll spin a log now. Let's see. Look at that.